and take us deeper into the subject. Haridas Prabhu, can you hear us? Your voice is muted.
Yeah, I can hear you now, loud and clear. And I was saying that was a very nice, wonderful, blissful kirtan to start with. So thank you very much uh, for that wonderful kirtan.
Aditya is just in higher secondary school, but he's very enthusiastic. He
Yeah,
sings very well, and he's very much into philosophy as well.
very wonderful. Good to hear. I mean, the depth. That was a new tune for me. Maybe I should learn it as well. But that was very nice. Thank you very much, Aditya Prabhu. So we would go ahead and get started. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभयेव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे.
Just before you begin, Prabhu, can I
Yes,
request if you're able to on your camera, please let us on the camera. But if the sound quality goes bad, then we can think of switching off. But otherwise, it'll be nice for the speaker to view who's there. Thank you. And please mute your microphones.
yeah, thank you very much. First and foremost, thank you once again for joining these sessions. We are conducting this session commonly for our devotee friends and family across Melbourne and also Perth devotees. So it's my great pleasure to speak something about the Lord and His glories and to learn something about our scriptures and thereby bringing some purification in my heart by speaking about these transcendental topics by which the person who is speaking and the persons who are hearing this both get purified. So, with that, we will continue our session on this topic, which is called as total surrender gives total freedom. For those who are joining us today, or they were unable to join us for the last two sessions, do not worry. I always ensure that there is a little bit of recap of what we have seen, and that recap is more than enough to correlate the topics that we are doing today. It is generally said that a good speaker, not me, generally a good speaker is the one who tells the audience why they are here for, who tells the audience what he has covered or she has covered before, and what is going to come up next. Because what this does is for a listener, it puts them at ease to understand which part of the lecture we should pay special attention, which part we can have our 40 winks, and which part, if we some jokes and humors, if we miss it, we can always go back to YouTube and learn it. So it is very important for us to try our level best to keep the attention of the audience. I'm pretty bad at it, but I'll try my level best to give what is there in the scriptures. So till now, in the last two lectures which we have seen, we have extensively spoken about this two terms, freedom and surrender. In fact, the first lecture for the Perth devotees, this would resonate. We spoke about how in this material world, we would like to have complete freedom, but at various different junctures in life, this freedom of ours is restricted. In our day-to-day life, we encounter birth. We don't have freedom of birth. We don't have freedom when we choose to die. We don't have freedom from diseases, and how much our botox injections we put, we don't have freedom from old age. So birth, death, old age and disease is something that is knocking on our doors every now and then. Especially during these troubled times across the world, we do see that these four phenomenon are creating a havoc across every single country. We might sit here in down under Australia, and when it is summers of Australia, now it is going to be winter, I presume, and it is winter has already started. But when it was summers, we always feel if we do the 40 degrees, maybe Switzerland would be a nice destination to go to. But today we see that even Switzerland, one of the heavens of Europe, is also under difficulties in these unprecedented times. So, freedom of choice lies with us to choose the right activity. And that's what brought us to the next topic, which was covered in the last lecture, which was talking about surrender. And we spoke about how this word has a very negative connotation in this world, where people feel surrender means giving away. People feel it is a fatigue, it's a failure. People feel the word is itself something that we have failed in our life. And we saw various different examples from the world of sports, from the world of battle, how this word surrender has been imprinted in our memory as something which is very despicable, which we should not be doing at all. However, if we look at the scriptures and we spoke about it and how this word surrender is given a positive connotation, how it gives a very different meaning in itself, and that is what we started speaking about. And we slowly came to the topic that what is Sharanagati, who is a Sharanagata, who is a Sharanya, who is a Sharanyam. So don't worry about these words if you have forgotten over the week. I will quickly recap it for you. Sharanagati is the process by which a Sharanagata, that means a person who wants to surrender, surrenders, that is Sharanagati, the process, to Sharanyam, the one who gives the surrender. So this is like saying the Lord is the person who gives the surrender to the living entities. So this is what we spoke about, and we started discussing, if we know surrender is a great topic to do, whom should we surrender to? And this is where we stopped our lecture last time. And we spoke about saying if we choose not to surrender, then Maya, or the external energy, which you might have heard about in your Bhagavad Gita lectures, the external energy of the Lord, that is the Mother Nature, makes us surrender to her. So we have got only two choices: either we surrender to Krishna, or either we surrender to the external energy of the Lord. So these two things makes us anyway take a conclusion that we have to surrender. And we saw extensively in the last lecture how by surrendering unto Maya, we face so many difficulties. Like, for example, we saw that Mother Nature is not very forgiving. For example, we saw many examples like a small child crawls up to a fire and tries to put a finger into the fire, Mother Nature won't say he's just a 4-year or 3-year-old boy or a girl. He or she might not know what is good for him or her, so I will not burn this child's finger. No, Mother Nature will not do. Whether it's an adult, whether it's an age old person, or whether it's a small baby, the finger would get burnt. So these are some of the examples that we learned last week, where we said that Mother Nature's surrender or external energy Maya's surrender is very difficult. So the most easiest thing to do is to surrender unto Krishna. So this is a quick recap of talking. We don't have full freedom even though we want. We would not like to surrender because that is a false connotation which is given to us. We saw the right connotation and we slowly came to a topic that if we don't surrender, we have to surrender to the other external energy, which is very painful to us. So if we are intelligent people, we will surrender to Krishna. So this is what we have seen till now. So then there was a natural question which was asked in the last lecture, which is where we start off today. What is the reason that we should surrender unto Krishna only? Why is Krishna being chosen as the person of surrender? Why cannot it be the 33 crore demigods that we have in our Hindu philosophy or Sanatana Dharma philosophy? Generally, for the Westerners, our philosophy is called as Hinduism. They called it so because we were the practitioners of the Vedic traditions on this side of the Hindu river or the Sindhu river. So when the Westerners started addressing that, they kept on calling people who belong to the southern side of Sindhu river. So they called it as Sindhu became Hindu over a course of time. However, in our Vedic tradition of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, etc., there is no mention of this text or word called as Hinduism. It's like a common term which has been put to us. However, for those people who do not know the Vedic Sanskrit, we accept that okay, you can call us as Hindus or Hinduist followers. The original word for Vedic tradition is called as Sanatana Dharma. Dharma means your eternal duty, and Sanatana means eternal. A duty that we are supposed to do eternally. That is the name of the religion. What a wonderful coinage of a term. It's not called as any isms. It's actually the eternal duty that a spirit soul is supposed to do. So the next time somebody asks which religion you follow, though it is easy to say Hinduism, but the best word and depiction and meaning would be Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion, the eternal duty that the soul is supposed to do. Then immediately the question is, what is the eternal duty that the soul is supposed to do? Hence, we are coming to the topic of surrender. One of the eternal duties, or in fact, the most important duty that the eternal duty that the soul is supposed to do is of surrender. Okay, we understood what is surrender. We understood we have to surrender. And now you are saying whom to surrender? We set the question as Krishna. We set the goal as Krishna. But in our religion, nothing is accepted as blind faith. Everybody has to question. They have to principally ask why this is so. Why not Ganesha? Why not Durga? Why not Lord Shiva? Why not Hanuman? Why not Lord Ramchandra? Why not Parashuram? I have heard my ancestors are worshipping so and so god or goddesses. Why cannot I surrender unto them? They have achieved great emancipation and they have achieved great victorious signs by worshipping to them. Why are you suggesting Krishna? These are the questions that a sincere seeking follower should have. And if any speaker or any person who is preaching or telling this Sanatana Dharma doesn't incite these questions in the minds of the listeners, then that is not the right way to say or talk about it. Everybody who is listening is having the independent and full freedom to question what they are listening. To question and get answers is a principal way of acquiring knowledge. If we do not question, if we do not ask questions or clarifications in our schools and colleges, we very well know that that subject matter of chemistry, biology, mathematics might be little less known to us even today. But if we go back and scourge our memories and we look into those topics where we asked certain question, where when the class was keeping quiet and the teacher gave us special attention and clarified that topic, we still remember those topics even today. The reason is we questioned our intellect. The reason is we questioned the rationale. The reason is we questioned the very basis of that assumption. And when we get the satisfying answers, then it makes us more easier to drink the truth which is being spoken in the scriptures. So hence today we will also question the basic rationale which the scriptures are saying, why to surrender unto Krishna. So one of the reasons we saw is that this is because Krishna says himself in the Bhagavad Gita that if somebody asks a question, which is the greatest book? Now, this was another question which was asked, and I'm going to open this up to the audience as well. As you know, that I always sometimes ask questions to the audience also, so please feel free to answer. Once I was giving such lectures, and after giving the lecture, one of the questions that was asked to me was, Prabhu, you said that our religion is Sanatana Dharma. Every religion we see, they follow one book which is very holy to them. Which is our book of Sanatana Dharma, which is considered as the holiest? So now the question is open to you. Which, according to you, is that one book which Sanatana Dharma keeps it as holiest book? Like Islam might have Quran, Christians might follow the Holy Bible, the Zoroastrians or the Jewish might follow the Torah, the Guru Nanaks and the Sikhs might follow the Guru Granth Sahib. So similarly for the Hindus or the Sanatana Dharma followers, the question has been, which is that one book? Question open to audience.
Bhagavad Gita.
Okay, Balraj Prabhu says it's Bhagavad Gita. Any other answers?
Srimad Bhagavatam.
Okay, Purushottama Prabhu says Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm happy that at least there are two different answers. So then only the contest starts. Okay, any other answer? Srimad Bhagavatam, Padmarada Mataji says, okay.
Srimad Bhagavatam.
Srimad Bhagavatam seems like a runaway winner. Everybody is voting. Yes, the four Vedas. Okay, somebody says the four Vedas. Very good. Ramayan. Okay. Nobody is touching the Puranas now. Shiv Puran.
Yeah, I think Prabhuji.
Yeah.
I think Prabhuji. I mean, I think it's very hard to say that it's Srimad Bhagavad or Bhagavad Gita.
Right.
I would actually say both, just because one teaches, of course, Vadi of Bhagwan Shri Krishna, and the other is actually all the incarnation and the all sweet pastime of Lord Krishna. So it's very hard to choose between the two. I'll go for both.
Go for both. Okay. Suppose this is an election, you can't elect two people, you have to put a vote on one, but then it is very difficult. Yes. Yeah, but then it becomes very difficult for us, right? And if you go on the streets today in India and ask them which is that one book, you might get another hundreds. Some books which you have not heard also, Garuda Puran, Bhavishya Puran, so many people say so many different things. So in fact, the answer is to this question is, as you all rightly said, many of these books, but the real answer in Sanatana Dharma is that we are not fascinated by the number one. There is no such fascination towards culminating towards a number which is one. In fact, when somebody comes to Sanatana Dharma and asks, which is your one holy book? First we say, welcome to our library. because we don't have one book, we have entire set of books, but the message given in all those books is one, that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. So the culmination of one is not in books, but is in the message amongst all the books. In fact, so much so that even in Sanatana Dharma, the message that it contains is unilateral to all other books of other religions as well. It doesn't cross itself. The rituals might be different, the way of acting might be different, the way of executing might be different, but the message is still one and one in nature, that the Supreme Personality of Godhead does exist and he has a form. So this is a very fundamental understanding we should have. So here in all the scriptures, when we read, and if we do an extensive study, it is mentioned that Krishna is the source of all incarnations. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes. If cause itself needs a cause, then that cause is Krishna. And why this verse is there? Because there are certain people who keep on asking this question. Okay, where did you come from? I came from my father. Where did your father come from? He came from his father. So where did his father come from? So 10 generations maybe we have catalogued, 20 generations maybe we have catalogued, but hundreds of generations nobody has catalogued. So when hundreds of generations nobody has catalogued, then the question comes, where did everything come from? Then the answer is God, because that is Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes. So where did God come from? No, he is the cause of all causes. There is no cause for him. That is the very definition of God in itself. So Krishna is the unilateral message that all the books give us. So when Krishna is the unilateral message, we have to listen to Krishna, whose glories have been spoken in Srimad Bhagavatam, like many of you said. Hence, it becomes one of the most principal books. And the words that he has spoken becomes one of the most principal. So if it is like the head of the family or the head of the state or head of the nation is the most important person, when that person's address comes on TV of how to lift down the lockdown or how to keep the lockdown, the whole world will listen to him, because the prominence is going to be given to him, because he is understood that he is the first citizen of Australia or he is the first citizen of India. So when he's given that prominence, we will all sit and listen to what he says. Similarly, when Krishna is given the prominence that he is the supreme personality of Godhead, we naturally would like to listen to what he says. And what he says is none other than Bhagavad Gita, the song of God. That is, Krishna himself says in the most important shloka of Bhagavad Gita. Now, this is very
Can
contradictory.
I ask you something?
Yes, please go ahead.
The verse which you said now,
Right.
in that one, you said supreme person.
Right.
Is there Krishna in that?
Yes, Ishvara, Parama, Krishna. So the third word itself, it says it's Krishna. Ishvara, Parama. Parama means the supreme. The controller, the God who is supreme is Krishna. So the first of the first word itself says that personality's name is Krishna.
So that is from which
Yeah.
book?
That's being spoken by Brahma in the book called Brahma Samhita. So where he speaks, when somebody asked Brahma this question, please tell me, O Brahma, how did you create this world? Seems like you are the creator of this world. He says, please don't put false allegations onto me. If I have not done something, I will very naturally call it out. Otherwise, it will be called as plagiarism, taking somebody else's content and putting it here. So Brahma says, I am not the person. Let me give you star bibliography of how I created this world, and that is done by Ishvara Parama Krishna. My boss's name is Krishna. He is the boss of all bosses. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha. What is his form? He is full of eternal knowledge and bliss. Anadir Adir Govinda. He doesn't have an age. He is there from time immemorial. Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes. So this is how the definition in itself that Brahma is giving. Does that answer the question?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. That brings the mood of that spirit of questioning. I really appreciate and encourage people. Please stop me whenever you have questions. And that's how we will move. So here we understand that Krishna is given the prominence and we have to listen to Krishna. And Krishna says in the most important shloka of Bhagavad Gita. I say that this is contradictory because 700 shlokas of Bhagavad Gita are important. But in that also, just like in our school examinations, when we go towards the exam, if you were in Indian school examinations, I can tell you, I do not know how Australian education is. But in Indian school examinations, we are studying our chapters very nicely. Still, we know we cannot finish it. So we go to the teacher and ask, can you give us the top 20 questions that we would like to study? Because that will become our question bank from where we will write our answer papers. Because if that 20 questions only we have to focus, then it becomes easier for us to go ahead and execute that answer. So here Krishna also gives 700 shlokas, but Srila Prabhupada in one of the lectures, he mentions when Krishna spoke this verse, he started to shout and say very loudly. He was not speaking very calmly or quietly. He was speaking very, very loudly so that he wanted everybody to listen. And that was the 18th chapter, the 66th verse that he spoke about, which he said, Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshashami Mashuchaha. He says, please do not worry. Abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. He uses the word surrender, and that is one of the most important shlokas. Now, somebody will say, he is telling us to abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. What does that mean? Isn't he the one who actually made all the religions? Why is he suddenly telling us to reject all the religion, varieties of religion and surrender unto me? Krishna is simply saying, if you surrender unto me, unto Krishna, that itself is the highest religion. In fact, he is giving us this sutra, he is giving us the secret that the highest form of practicing religion is to surrender unto God or Krishna himself. Now, when Krishna is saying that, everybody starts thinking of questions, why not other demigods? So I'm going to open up these questions to many others. I am going to play the part that we should not surrender to Krishna. And I'm going to ask one personality where we feel nowadays people say that we should surrender to these personalities. So it's going to be a for and against kind of a conversation. So I'm going to say why we should surrender to Krishna. And you guys have to convince me or give me some examples of whatever you have heard, and it can be wrong, it can be right. Don't worry about it. Give me some reasons of why we should not surrender to Lord Shiva, but we should surrender to Krishna. So this is the first question. Somebody has to convince me. I am saying that we should surrender to Lord Shiva. So anybody in the audience can tell me any reasons, what they have heard, or they feel that, no, I think Lord Shiva is correct, want to support the motion. Don't worry about right or wrong. Please speak your mind out. Yes, open to audience.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, this is Manju speaking.
Yes.
Any prayers you do or any puja, any offering you do, at the end of prayer or puja, everything is offered to Krishna, saying Krishna Arpanam.
Okay. Very nice answer. Okay. Very good.
So they finish the puja or prayer, whatever the ratha or anything it is, with the Krishna Arpanam.
Right. So
I don't know if that's the right answer.
Okay, that's a good answer. That's a good perspective. We will hear from others also. Padma Radha Mataji says that Shiva also prays to Krishna. So if he is praying to somebody, then Krishna has to be supreme. So that is the reason. Okay. Anybody else? Why Krishna and why not Lord Shiva?
Prabhuji, in every picture of Shiva, you find him meditating on someone. So obviously there is some supreme authority, to which he is praying or he's meditating on. So
Right.
whether that is Krishna or somebody else, that's the question. But definitely that proves that he's not the
Very
supreme.
good. We will see that. We will demystify whom he is meditating on today. No problem. Anybody else?
We talked about the greatest grantha in Sanatana Dharma, which is, Srimad Bhagavatam. It is because it is a literal incarnation of Lord Krishna, and within Srimad Bhagavatam itself, it is described. I can't remember the verses, but that Lord Shiva himself is the greatest Vaishnava, and he worships Lord Krishna. Hence, that refutes your point, Prabhuji.
Excellent. So all the points. So good enough. I'll give you more chances. Anybody else wants to speak? Yes, Purushottam Prabhu, I see you're trying to press the mute button. Unmute yourself. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I think Krishna doesn't have any weapons. All other have their own weapons. So there is no enemy to him. This is what I thought.
That's a very beautiful answer. Everyone else has weapons up in his arms to protect themselves, but Krishna is the only one who enjoys flute, right? He just enjoys music. He's like putting those boom boxes, and he's just going boom boom. He wasn't just here Aditya Prabhu's kirtan always. So that's really nice. So okay, anybody else? Yes, Pradeep Prabhu.
There's a mantra, Mrityunjay mantra, which calls, which says Shiva is giving moksha or mukti to everybody. Like we are praying to Shiva, so he's also able to give you moksha or mukti.
Right.
So that's what I understand from the Mrityunjay mantra.
Right. So Pradeep Prabhu is standing against the wind, and he's saying that Lord Shiva also gives us moksha. Yes, so let's look at all these answers, and I want to give because many of you said I do not know whether it's said, not said. So let's just spend 5-10 minutes on this answer. The first answer that we got was saying that Krishnarpana Mastu. So it's perfectly right. All Vedic rituals, when we complete, we say Om Tat Sat Sri Krishnarpana Mastu. That means all that I have done, finally, if it is incomplete in any which way, I would like to offer this to Krishna because he makes everything complete. So that's the mentality that we have. So it says mandrahinam kriyahinam bhaktihinam chana janardana yatkridam tu maya deva paripurnam tadastite prayashchityani sheshani tapakarmatmakani tani maseshanam tatvat Sri Krishnarpanamastu. So this is the verse. It says that mandrahinam, sometimes I might speak mantras which are absolutely makes no sense. If it is saying something else, I might be pronouncing something else. None of us are vernacular enough in Sanskrit. So mandrahinam, sometimes we are absolutely wrong in mandra. Kriyahinam, our person will say put ghee inside the fire, we'll be putting water inside the fire, because our hands and ears don't coordinate with each other whenever we want to do certain activities. Mandrahinam, kriyahinam, forget about all that. People say you should have devotion in the heart, but bhakti hinam, we don't have bhakti also. So if we don't chant the proper mantras, we might have not done the right rituals and we might not have devotion. Yet all these three things get complete only when we offer the results of whatever nonsense we have performed to Krishna. That then Krishna bestows that quality. So finally we offer it to Krishna because only he is the supreme boss who can sanction it. There is another shloka which one of them says that to says akashat patitam toyam yada gacchati sagaram sarvadeva namaskaram keshavam pratigacchati. This is another beautiful verse which is very easy to contemplate. Sanskrit is very beautiful. It says, just like from the clouds when the water falls down in the form of rain, it falls in the drains, it falls on the trees, it falls on the leaves, it falls on the grass, it falls on the river, and all this water gets collected in the groundwater table. Sometimes this water goes and mingles into the river. Akashat patitam toyam. Toyam means water which falls from the akash, from the sky. Yada gacchati sagaram. Its final destination is none other than the sea. All the rivers move towards the sea. Similarly, all the mantras, whatever we chant, the final destination where it goes to is Krishna. Sarva Deva Namaskaram. Whomever we offer our obeisances, finally it goes to Krishna. So again, this is said. And then Padmarada Mataji said that Shiva also worships Krishna, and Sumit Prabhu also said that Lord Shiva prays to Krishna. And this is told in Srimad Bhagavatam, Nimnaganam Yata Ganga, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambho. Just like the greatest of the rivers is Mother Ganga, similarly the greatest of the Vaishnava devotees of Krishna is Lord Shiva. Very wonderful. So we have established at least one of the greatest questions. If you go to this website called as QOARA, Quora.com, every 2 questions are Lord Shiva is great or Lord Vishnu is great. Lord Shiva is great, and no many people will write so many nonsenses. And after writing those nonsense, they will still have the question, but I think Lord Shiva is great or Lord Vishnu is great. So if you have read Quora for many days, today at least our quota of answering those questions are over. Very clearly, Lord Shiva is the one who is greatest devotee of Krishna, and anybody who approaches Lord Shiva for bhakti or devotion to Lord Krishna, then Lord Shiva immediately gives that benediction. He gets very So in this case, we see that one more thing that one devotee mentioned, that he's meditating on someone. Now this is also very important. Whom does he meditate upon? That also the shloka is given in Shastras. Brahma bole chaturmukhe Rama Rama Hare Hare Mahadeva Panchamukhe Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. So he's not only meditating. If you look at that picture, he has beads in his hand. So by his beads, he's actually chanting the glories of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we have established that Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee of Krishna, and he is the supreme personality. And even in Shiv Puran, if you pick it up, he actually says that Vishnu is the supreme. In the Shiv Puran, there are many instances where he is mentioned as supreme at many different places. But if we look at the scriptures in itself, the scriptures have been divided into many parts for people to slowly move from the mode of ignorance, passion, to slowly to the higher modes of material nature. So we classify the scriptures also in different classifications. It is like if somebody does not understand the best of the Hollywood movies, first they have to first understand cartoons. From cartoons, they have to go to documentaries. From documentaries, they have to go to little higher pictures. From there, art films. From the art films, they have to go to the Oscar films. So like that, if they understand, then they understand the full mood of cinematography or the pictures in itself. Similarly, to understand God also, we have classified scriptures into various different modes. So some scriptures might speak about some glories of the demigods, but in those scriptures, if you scrutinizingly study, you will get this fact very, very clear, that it is Lord Krishna or Vishnu who is the supreme personality of Godhead. So now comes the second question. Okay, Shiva is out of the picture. What about Ganesha? So many people worship Ganesha. In fact, even in Vishnu temples, right at the doorstep, we have Ganesha. I don't know if you have seen or not. So what is the answer? Yes or no? Who is supreme? I will give you 1 point favoring Ganesha. So those who are Ganesha favorites can note down this point. We are talking about Bhagavad Gita. Do you know who wrote Bhagavad Gita?
Vedavyas.
Vedavyas wrote it. But he did not write it, physically write it. Who wrote it?
Lord Ganesha.
Lord Ganesha wrote it. You see that one of his tusk is broken. He's called Ekadanta. He broke his tusk to write Mahabharata, and in Mahabharata comes Bhagavad Gita. So if Ganesha wrote Bhagavad Gita compiled by Vedavyasa, but then he wrote Bhagavad Gita, then isn't he the supreme? Any answers?
I think, of course, we need to worship Lord Ganesha as Lord who can remove obstacles in path of our bhakti towards going Lord Krishna. And I think Lord Ganesha being the son of Lord Shiva as well. And then I think there are a lot of mention that Mata Parvati wonders that how Lord Ganesha has become so intelligent, and the Ved knowledge and everything else, and he understands who the Supreme is, and which is Lord Krishna. So I think there's a lot of mention of that. So with that reference, I think it's clear again that why we should think we should believe that Lord Krishna is a Supreme Lord, not Lord Ganesha.
Yeah, the simplest of the answers are that Lord Shiva, who is the father of Ganesha, he himself is a devotee of Krishna. So here, the son who always looks up to the father, who is such a great personality, so he also follows the similar pattern of Krishna being the supreme personality of Godhead. And as you rightly said, he is the remover of material obstacles. Spiritual obstacles are removed by Krishna. So material obstacles, whatever we have, Lord Ganesha removes it, but spiritual obstacles is removed by Krishna and Nrsimhadev. So again, Lord Vishnu's form. So we have moved off from Ganesha also. What about Durga? So many people worship Durga. Any answers?
She is the wife of Shiva, Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Wife of Shiva, Parvati in a form. But why not? Can't she be the supreme? She is the one who takes care of this entire world. She's the prison wardener. She's the warden of this prison house of earth.
The material world.
Material world, yes.
Maya.
She's a Shakti, isn't it?
She's a Shakti, yeah, correct. But why is she not the supreme? We'll just see a small story to explain this fact. There was once two Brahmanas were there. The name of the Brahmanas one of the name of the Brahmana was Chandidas. As the name suggests, Chandi is none other than Lord Durga herself, and he was the devotee of Mother Durga. He had a younger brother. Now, this younger brother, he was a great worshipper of Lord Vishnu. So every day, what used to happen is that this Chandidas used to worship every day Mother Durga, and he used to tell all his family members, you all have to worship Mother Durga only. And anybody who doesn't worship, he used to get very angry. So then when this actually happened, so he used to always mention that every morning we should come and worship Durga with flowers, with incense, with karpur, with aarti and all of that. Now this Chandidas had a very nice garden, and in that garden he used to go and pluck flowers and offer every day to Mother Durga. And Mother Durga used to accept it. But his younger brother had a Shaligram. Shaligram is none other than a form of Lord Vishnu. And he was very attached to that Shaligram. And he used to always not spend time worshipping Durga. He used to worship every day the Shaligram Shila. So when this worship was going on, one day this Chandidas saw that this person is such a great offender. He is staying in my house and I worship Lord Mother Durga, and he is not worshipping, he is worshipping Shaligram. So he kicked his younger brother outside the house because he was not complying with the rules and regulations of the family and the ancestry that they were following. But the younger brother never protested. He went outside, made a hut for himself in a small hamlet he was staying, and he was continuing to worship his Shaligram. One day, when this younger brother thought that I should offer some flowers to this Shaligram, he saw that in his side of the house, there were no gardens, no flowers. So he looked at his elder brother's house from where he was kicked off. And he saw there was beautiful garden with wonderful flowers on it. And he knew that if he could pluck one flower and offer to his Shaligram Shila, his Shaligram deity, then Lord Vishnu will be very pleased. But he knew that if he tried even to pluck one flower, his elder brother will beat him black and blue. So what he did, he just looked at one of the flowers and he mentally concocted that I am breaking that flower. I am taking that flower and I am offering it to Lord Vishnu in the Shaligram Shila. Remember, he never plucked the flower, he never broke it from its stem, he never offered it. He just mentally imagined that I am taking this flower from my brother's garden and I am putting it to Shaligram Shila. That's it. He completed his worship and he was doing his duty. Sometime later, this Chandidas, who had the time scheduled to worship Mother Durga, he came outside his garden and he wanted to pluck flowers. The same flower which was mentally offered to the Shaligram Shila, this Chandidas also plucked the flower and put it in his flower basket. And every day he used to offer incense and flowers to Mother Durga. Today also he offered the flowers. When he offered that one flower which he offered to the which was mentally offered by his younger brother to the Shaligram, when it touched Mother Durga's feet, she immediately exploded and came before him, and she said that I am very, very pleased by your action. Chandidas thought that maybe it is a new fragrance of incense which I have bought from Australia, which has made this particular thing possible. What is the reason? Every day I offer flowers, nothing has happened. Today, why is she so pleased with me? Then he says, yes, mother, thank you for giving this wonderful darshan. What made it so pleasing today? It is the same laddu that I offer. It is the same bhoga. It's the same incense. It's the same flower. She said, no, you offered that one flower which was offered to my boss, Krishna. In fact, he is my boss, and you offered that flower which was offered to him. So I consider it as my prasad. Hence, all those people who worship my boss are more favorable to me, are more loving to me, and are more given mercy by me, those who worship Krishna, than those who worship me directly. Now, this person, immediately after hearing this, he finished his puja and he started walking. Then Mother Durga said, hey, where are you going? He said, you told me the truth that your boss has to be worshipped. So many days I have been worshipping you for no reason. Now I am going to worship my Shaligram Shila of my younger brother, and I am going to worship Lord Krishna. So this was the narrative, and later it is known that this same Chandidas wrote such nice poems about Sri Radha and Krishna that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to call him and say, please recite. And he used to hear, who was Krishna himself. Krishna himself used to love the poems written by Chandidas, who was the greatest worshipper of Mother Durga. But when he came to know it is Krishna whom we have to pay our ultimate obeisances to. So by all this, what do we come to know? Like last time I explained that I will speak about why Krishna is the object of surrender. Every Shastra, every demigod and goddesses do mention that he is the supreme personality of Godhead. He is the supreme enjoyer. He is the one who can give shelter to everyone. And that is the principal reason why we should offer surrender and shelter unto him. The reason why we should offer surrender unto him is because this surrender which we do to all other demigods will go in vain, says Krishna. Avajananti Mahamudaha says in Krishna in Bhagavad Gita that those who surrender unto the demigods, by death all those surrenders will go in vain. But he says in the same Bhagavad Gita, Ma Shuchaha, if you surrender unto me, I will ensure that your surrender will never go vain. So this is the beautiful way by which Krishna establishes this irrevocable fact that surrendering unto Krishna over the demigods is one of the most important thing to do for us. So in this case, so we learned that we have to surrender. But when we are talking about gods and goddesses, there might be one simple question in our mind. Why can't we surrender to other human beings? Why can't we surrender to gods and goddesses are okay, but why can't we surrender to human beings? The answer is human beings themselves are not eternal in nature. They cannot protect their own words. So hence surrender to any kind of human beings become very much impossible as a suggestion. So by this we come to know that surrender is very important, and the process of surrender is extremely important for us. So now we will learn one small tidbit. I know we are at the top of the hour, 10 minutes to go, but we will learn one small shloka which is said by Lord Rama in the verse in Ramayana, which is considered as the surrender shloka said by Lord Ram. And look at the magnanimity of the person who offers surrender, who offers us shelter. Because if somebody does not understand what do I get, for example, you are going to the supermarket and you want to buy something. If you do not know what is the value of that product, you will never buy that product. That's why in advertisement they keep on saying this gives you this. Well, you buy Colgate, it'll give you white teeth. If you smile at someone, you don't need a torch. So it gives you such a value statement that you will go and buy that Colgate or a Promise or a Close Up or whatever it might be. You'll go and buy that product. And most of the time it's over exaggerated. But here Lord Ramchandra gives a very beautiful verse where he mentions about surrender. And this comes in the story of Ramayana, where while the entire monkey army and Lord Rama was camping on this side of the sea, suddenly in the air they saw one great demon along with his 4 ministers with maces and clubs were traveling and coming towards this camp. Then when the monkeys saw these 4 people, they immediately stopped them in the air and they said, "Who are you? Tell us." And he said, "I am the brother." Imagine somebody introducing themselves like this. Somebody asks you, "Who are you?" You will immediately say, "I am Nadya Chandra Prabhu, I stay in Melbourne," or "I am Haridas Varya, I stay in Bombay." This is how you speak. Look at the way Vibhishana, who was the one who was flying, he was mentioning his introduction. He was giving the CV or a resume of Vibhishana. He says, there is a great king in Lanka. Many FIRs and police complaints are on him. He is the greatest rapist in the world. He has stolen many things in this world. Number one, he is a crooked person in this world. I am that person's younger brother. This is what the first communication that Vibhishana is saying. We can't even imagine somebody giving us an introduction like this. Imagine if you are the wife or the husband, and when you first met your wife or husband, you give such an introduction to each other. We might not have been married at all, right? I am so and so, and this is how we have come together. So this is the kind of introduction Vibhishana gives. Sugriva, the greatest monkey commander, says, "You stay right here. You cannot join our troop." He says, "Look, I have been banished by my kingdom from Lanka. I want to join Rama's army." So there is a big conference which is happening now inside Rama's camp. Rama calls Hanuman, Rama calls Jambavan, Rama calls Sugriva. These are characters in his monkey troop. And he says, "What do you think? Should we allow Vibhishana to become a part of us? Though he is coming from the enemy camp, do you think that we should give him shelter?" First Jambavan speaks, first Sugriva speaks and says, "Look, politically this is not a wise move. He's from the opposition party, and from the opposition party he is trying to come here. I know we have not kept any resorts or tried to buy him out, but then the fact is that he is trying to come here. This is not right. This might act against us. So we cannot allow this to happen. He might create a sabotage." Okay, Rama hears that. Then he says, "Jambavan, you are the eldest amongst the bears. What do you think so?" Jambavan says that, "Look, I also don't think that he should be allowed. He should be, he's a part of the enemy. This can be very brutal to us if something goes wrong." Then he asks Hanuman. Hanuman immediately says, "I think he should be allowed." And listening at this answer, everybody is astonished. Sugriva said no. Jambavan said no. Nal Neel said no. Angad said no. And suddenly only Hanuman is supporting. So Rama immediately asks, "What is the reason? Why are you supporting this person whereas everybody else in the troop has said no?" Then Hanuman says, "Looking at his face itself, I understand that he cannot commit any harm. And look at the way he came. He held his hand completely and he said the magical words, O Rama. The magical words that he said was, he wants to surrender unto you. And when Rama heard this in his ears, immediately he got up and said the most beautiful shloka in Ramayana in itself. Just like we saw the most beautiful shloka in Bhagavad Gita, we have to see the most beautiful shloka in Ramayana also, where Rama says, Sakrit Deva Prapannaya Tavasmi iti yachate abhayam sarva bhutebhyo dadam yetat vratam mama. He says, I to all those beings. Now he says to all the beings. He doesn't say human being. He doesn't say I will give protection only to human being. He says to anybody who comes, be it animal, be it insect, be it human being, be it any person who comes to me. So shelter and surrender is not only for human beings, not for you and me. Lord Rama says, Abhayam Sarva Bhutebhyo, to all those beings, fully seek my shelter and plead for my mercy. Now, but he is putting a condition. He is saying, Sakrid eva prapannaya tavasmin iti yachate. Somebody has to come and fall at my feet and say, I am yours. If somebody says that once, Prabhuji, that's the problem, Prabhu. Who will come? We never come and say, I am yours. You are mine, I can say. You are mine, I can definitely say. I am yours is very difficult to give. But Rama puts this small condition, small but big. Sakrit Deva Prapannaya, that if you come to me and you plead and say once, I am yours, then I take a vow. And we all know Lord Rama's vow. When he took that I will marry only once, he ensured he will marry only once. He didn't even see the shadow of any other woman other than Mother Sita. That is the strength of his vow. So he's saying, I take this vow that I will protect that devotee come what may. And to elucidate the answer of Hanuman, he gives a very small story. And that is a very beautiful story in Ramayana, with which we will try to end the session here. And the story, he says, is of a small hunter. This hunter goes to the forest to catch certain birds for his meal. One day he goes into the forest and he sees a male and a female bird, and the male bird flutters away to get some twigs to build its nest, and the female bird is alone at the tree branch. The hunter climbs the tree, catches hold of the female bird, puts it in his trap, and starts to walk away thinking that he has caught his prey for the evening. Immediately the clouds burst and the rain starts to fall in the forest. He wants now a shelter. So he understands he cannot go further. So he, below that same tree, he takes shelter, waiting for the rain to pass, the clouds to disperse. In the meantime, this female bird is caught in the trap. She is crying out for help. Listening to that, the male bird comes there and sits on the branch of the tree. And Rama is saying this to all the monkey warriors. He says, the two birds are conversing with each other in their language. The male bird says, oh my beloved, you have been caught now. How can I save you? The female bird says, don't worry about saving me. This is the will of providence. Everybody has to die once. Seems like they have been all attending Zoom lectures for many years. We are the ones who don't know such activities. They have been attending many lectures. So the female bird says, don't worry, I think that this is the will of providence. Okay, then the male bird says, now what we shall do? This hunter is taking shelter in our tree. So the female bird says, haven't you heard of how the sages speak? Now he is taking shelter of our tree. That means he is our guest. He has come to our house. So it is our duty to serve him. So the male bird says, oh, I have to serve him. How do I serve him? Then the female bird says, go and flutter around and carry some twigs so that he can make a fire. So this male bird goes because she thinks that this hunter, though he's the enemy, he's taking shelter at their house, goes and picks the twigs from various different places and keeps it in front of the hunter so that he can light the fire. So the hunter understands this bird is giving me twigs to light the fire, such greatness. So he lights the fire. Then immediately the female bird says, now he has lit the fire, the heat has come and the weather has dispersed. Now he might be hungry, so we have to feed him. So the male bird immediately jumps into the fire and says, please accept my flesh as you are eating for your evening dinner. And looking at that, the female also jumps and says, I have to serve you because you have taken shelter unto us. Rama cites this example and says, the bird which is trapped and the bird which considered the hunter as an enemy who took shelter also had the heart of mercy to protect the hunter at the time of difficulty. If a bird can do that, why cannot I give shelter to Vibhishana? This is the question he says, and he says, Sakrideva prapannaya tavasmin iti yachate abhayam sarvabhute bhyo etat vratam mama. He says, this is my vow. If Rama can say something like this, please understand Mother Sita is 2 steps higher. It is impossible nowadays to just glorify the male member of the person and not glorify the female member. Otherwise, there will be a big riot. So Sita doesn't need our advocacy. Sita is 2 times higher than this. She tells another great story, a small story again. When Hanuman goes to Lanka again after killing Ravana, and he goes to Mother Sita and says, Sita, I will bring the good news to you that Rama has turned victorious. Sita is very happy that Rama has turned victorious. Rama sends a message to Hanuman saying that please bring Sita now. And then Hanuman goes and says, Mother Sita, Rama has ordered, he has killed Ravana, now he has ordered you to come. And then Hanuman looks around the Ashok Vatika where Sita is living. Sita was troubled by so many demonesses, and they were troubling her, harassing her by words. They were pulling her hair. They were giving all kind of nonsense stories to her. Hanuman said, Mother Sita, why don't you just give me the permission? I will kill all these demonesses right now who have been harassing you and who have been giving trouble to you from time immemorial. Mother Sita says, don't say such things. Please never say such things to such people. Hanuman is wondering, why is this person saying like this? Why is Mother Sita saying, don't trouble the demoness? And Mother Sita says, I will tell you a story, Hanuman. Please listen. Hanuman has heard this story from Rama before. Now he is hearing a story. So Hanuman is the most luckiest character, hearing two stories in Ramayana while the fighting is going on. So Mother Sita is telling the story. There was a person. Once he went into the forest. Hanuman thought, seems like the same story, but no, Mother Sita says this is not that story. It's a little different story. So this man is going into the forest, and while this man was going into the forest, a big tiger came behind him. Looking at the tiger, just like all of us, he also ran. He ran for his life. And he was running, the tiger was running behind him. Suddenly the man saw a tree and he climbed on top of the tree. And he took shelter on top of a branch of a tree. And the tiger was trying to climb the tree, but it was not able to climb. And it was growling, it was hungry, and it just missed the opportunity of eating the man. And it was really growling and talking to the man, saying that when you come down, just like our mothers used to say, when we come back from school, I am going to give you. Similarly, the tiger was also saying, when you come down, I'm going to eat you up. The man started climbing higher and higher, and finally he reached a branch which was thick enough to support him. And this tiger was prowling below. Slowly later, the man saw that on that same tree branch, there was a big bear which was sitting on the tree branch. The bear was talking to the man and it said, look, don't worry. I live in this tree and you have come to this tree and taken my shelter. So why don't you come near me and sit next to me? And my hands are fully furry. It's like a Dunlop pillow. And if you are tired, you can sleep in my arms and I will give you good rest as if it's a nice soft foam mattress. And the man said, thank you very much. And he went into the arms of the bear and he started sleeping in the arms of the bear. And he nicely slept because he was so tired and he was so fearful of the tiger. Now, when he was sleeping in the arms, the tiger below started conversing with the bear. Shh. Hey, bear, look at here. And the bear looked down. He said, tiger, what's up? Then the tiger said, look, you are an animal. I am an animal. He is a human being. You know how human beings give trouble to all of us. They give trouble to each other also. You have heard COVID-19 stories. So you have to ensure that, you know, you just push the man. You just push him outside. I will ensure I will never eat you. I will give you protection. We are animals, no? We have the animal pact between us. Bear said, nothing doing. He is the person who has come to take shelter unto me, surrender unto me. So how can I push him outside? I will not push him outside. So the tiger was very despondent that this bear is not listening to them. Slowly, after some time, the man woke up and he was fully refreshed. And this time the bear was feeling tired, so the bear went to sleep. And now the tiger started putting the same plan again. This time he was speaking to the man. He said, "Hey, man, I have a proposal." He said, "Yes, what it is?" He said, "You know, you and me very well know that when I go from here and when the bear wakes up, he will be hungry and he will eat you. So I am very sure he is going to eat you when the chance comes up. So why don't you do one thing? I will protect you. I will promise I will never eat you. You just push the bear from the branch." And should I even tell you what happened, or should I wait it for the next class? What would have happened? Did the man push the bear? A big debate can happen at 9 p.m. prime time, right? We know many famous journalists who can come and talk to us about it. Did the man do justice? Big news tomorrow at Australian Downtime Telegraph News can come. But what happened was, we all know, the man pushed the bear. And when the bear was pushed, the bear was half sleepy, it was falling down. But the bear was quick in its instincts. It caught a lower branch than the higher branch and it climbed itself to a lower branch. And it escaped itself, still away from the prowls of the tiger. Now the tiger got the perfect chance and the man was very scary now. He pushed the very bear in the arms where he slept. And now the tiger spoke to the bear. Didn't I tell you? These men are always like this. I told you that you push him before. Now he pushed you. Now why don't you take revenge and push him down? And at that very point of time, the bear answered, "It is not my nature. For those who have taken shelter unto us, it is not my nature to commit evil to others who have committed evil unto me." So that means the very basis of surrender, and the person who is giving shelter has to ensure that even if evil is committed to him, evil is not committed back, because that is the fundamental philosophy of shelter. So Sita is saying this to Hanuman: they might have done a lot of evil things to me, but I am not going to do revenge and evil things to them. So please leave them. They are all my maid servants and they are all wonderful human beings. Whom is she speaking of? Of all the demoness and everybody. So if Rama is great in giving shelter, Sita is 2 steps higher. So we don't need any new feminist advocacies of how Sita is greater, because she is always greater in her own position. So such is the glory of surrender and shelter. And such is the glory of surrendering unto Krishna. The next time we meet, we will talk about the final process, the process of surrender. So what we have established here is that we have established freedom is limited, surrender is essential, surrender unto Krishna is the right choice, and surrender to Krishna is the right choice because of many reasons that we saw. And Krishna is the apt person to give us surrender, because he is our ultimate benefactor and our ultimate well-wisher. Even though we might have done evil acts unto him, he ensures that he doesn't do any evil acts to us. So such a mentality of surrender gives us the full freedom, which is the process which we will see in the next lecture. I have gone 5 to 10 minutes above. Apologies for that, but we just wanted to drive home this point. So this entire series will have 1 or 2 more lectures, but then mostly we'll try to complete the essence of it in the next lecture, which is the very process of how we walk towards surrender, or how we surrender ourselves in terms of the process. So we stop ourselves here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. If there are any questions, comments, clarifications, we can discuss.
One question.
Yes.
If somebody surrendered to some other god, Shiva or goddess, what will happen?
Very good question. So what will happen if somebody surrenders? And the best example is the intent of the surrender is very important. We can take an example from the Shastras to see what happens. There was a demon called as Banasur. Now he was a demon where he went to Lord Shiva and prayed unto him that you give me unlimited strength. And Lord Shiva gave him unlimited strength. And his second boon was, you have to protect me being my personal servant. So he made Lord Shiva also as his personal servant. Finally, he thought that if Lord Shiva is my personal servant and he protects me, nobody can defeat me. But Krishna came as Dwarkadish and defeated Banasur and Lord Shiva also. So we see that anybody who is approaching the demigods and surrendering unto them for some benefit, then it is not surrender, it is a business. That will not
If it's
give
not for, if it's not for material thing,
right,
like actual surrender,
right.
seeing as a supreme person, what will happen?
So when the person is not supreme, then the person will give us choices to go towards that person who is the supreme. That's the only thing that happens. Just like the example of Chandidas. When he was surrendering himself to Durga, she appeared and said, please go and surrender to the right person because you have the right intent. So we get meandered or pointed towards the right person who is to be able to be surrendered. So it
But
acts
if
as
we
a catalyst.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
If we see another god as a supreme person, we believe that it's a supreme person, and we actually surrender in a good sense. That's actual surrender, isn't it?
Yes, but the jurisdiction of that person. So what are we surrendering against? When we surrender, it's not just giving up our material concoctions or falling at their feet, and it is not the practical activity of the surrender. The surrender has to give fruit of something. What is that fruit? That fruit is nothing but pure love towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now when we yeah, so let me just complete 1 minute.
Yeah, sure.
So when we the aim of surrender is to gain the fruit of surrender, which is the love towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, because only that surrender will satisfy the soul. Anybody else whom we surrender to, any demigod or demigoddesses, cannot give us the same fruit of love of Godhead for Supreme Personality of Godhead. They can give us some material benefit, protection, shelter, and all of that. And we will learn that in the next lecture, where we talk about the Vrajvasis surrender and other people surrender. What's the difference? There we see that any god or goddesses other than any demigods or goddesses that whom we surrender unto cannot give us the ultimate benefit which the Shastras are trying to say, which is to love Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unconditionally and attain the love of Godhead, which is considered the highest supreme benefit. They can give us protection, they can give us material enjoyments, they can ensure good health, they can give us even liberation up to certain limit. But higher than that is also to love of Godhead. So it is up to us to choose or to have the choice. What do we select? Do we need the highest, or you do need the intermediate or the lower? Does that make sense?
No, no.
Yeah, go ahead.
When we surrender to Krishna, as you said, you said it's the love to Krishna. So what actually we are getting when we surrender? That's a self-realization, isn't it?
So when we are surrendering to Krishna, there is a reciprocation of love. Just like this. For example, in the material world, if we want to take an example, we have our mother who is cooking nice foodstuffs for us. And if we surrender unto some of her wishes, It's not that we have become a subjugate or a lower slave, but what it increases is the loving relationship between the mother and the child. The mother always understands the child is surrendered unto me for protection. She gives not only protection, she gives love also, right? So similarly, it can happen in the demigods and the goddesses of the world. They can give us protection, but that ultimate love to pull us out of this material world and to ensure that we are constantly loving the supreme person cannot be given by demigods and goddesses. What they can give is only protection. They can give us protection, they can give us material benefits, they can give us good health, they can ensure that we don't suffer a lot due to diseases. Those things they can give, but they cannot give the ultimate benefit, which is to love Krishna, who is the source of all pleasures. He is the source of all pleasures, and to love him, that benefit they cannot give. So that is why Krishna himself says, those who surrender unto the demigods are of not of the wisest of the intelligence. This is his verdict, which he is saying to Arjuna. I mean, it is not said by me or anybody else. Krishna himself says, Avajananti Mahamudaha. So he says, men of superior intelligence surrender unto me. And that is why he also says in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam Janmanamante Jnanavan Man Prapadyante Vasudeva Sarvam Miti Mahatma Sadurlabha. He says, such people who surrender only unto me, I can count them in my fingers, Arjuna. They are not many people. Many people come to understand religion. Many people surrender also to the demigods. But there is hardly 1 in a million, in fact, 1 in a billion, in fact, 1 in a billion who will surrender unto me. So we are talking about that surrender, that 1 in a billion. It's not that we cannot achieve it, we can. It's just that we need to tune ourselves to that perspective. So, so the short answer is the demigods help us definitely to point us towards Krishna, but it's only Krishna who can give us the ultimate fruit of surrender, which is the love of Godhead.
So love of Godhead, that means, is it moksha?
It's higher than moksha. So we will learn that in the next lecture. So I am very happy that these questions are coming. So now that we have sold surrender, so where is surrender going to take us? That's the immediate next question. So we will definitely talk about it, because Lord Shiva speaks to Narada Muni 3 different stages of surrender: initial, middle, and highest. And we will see Vrajvasi's surrender also. So we will talk about that in the next lecture. I don't want to steal the thunder now, but just hold on, or otherwise I can send a personal text to Nadia Chandra Prabhu and he can forward it to you, just because everybody else is there and I want everybody to come back for the next session as well. So I will just hold on to myself in giving that answer. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, I see couple of. Yeah, go ahead.
Prabhu, am I right in assuming that we talk about Vishnuji, we talk about Rama, we talk about Krishna, they are the one and the same?
Yes. So all these are incarnations of the Lord. So all of them, they do come and tell us that they are the Supreme Personality to whom we should surrender. However, there are small differences in terms of stages between them as well. Not to see them as different, but to see them as the fruit that we get. For example, if we surrender unto Lord Vishnu, nothing's wrong. It's glorious. As somebody else was speaking, we will get liberation. Is that glorious? It's absolutely glorious. But the mood in Vishnu's world is of awe and reverence. You cannot consider God to be your friend, your son, your mother, your father, your ultimate friend. Now, if you know, the relationship between you and your boss is very different between relationship between you and your friend. And you know that the relationship between you and your friend is very different from the relationship between you and your mother or your father. And you do know that the relationship between you and your mother and father is very different from the relationship that you have between you and your wife or your good friend, who is your life partner. So we see that the gradations of relationships is always measured on the increasing philosophy of love. So in Vishnu's world, it's very awe and reverence. He's the boss, we are the servant. But as we move more towards, different rasas, different mellows, Krishna becomes more approachable in terms of he's as a friend, he's as a son, he's as a father, he's as a mother, he's also as a lover for some. And when we come to the Vrajvasis, they don't even consider he's God. So that's even the highest. So my answer is Rama, Vishnu, awe and reverence. Krishna, entirely different ball game. You open up a couple of more mellows out there. So while we go with that reverential attitude right at the beginning, but we should understand that there are higher mellows as well. So it's not wrong to understand there are higher mellows, but we start at the lowest. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, Prabhu.
Okay. Any other question?
Yes, I've got one question.
Yeah, sure.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay. So you know how you said in one of the verses, Krishna said, surrendering unto me is different to surrendering unto the demigods.
Right.
I just want to read more about it. Can you, if you don't mind, can you tell me which chapter does Bhagavad Gita covers this topic?
Yeah, so in the 18th, in fact, in the 18th chapter, he summarizes a lot of slokas, but in the verse of, I can tell you the exact verse where he says in 18.65 and 10.66, these two words, these two verses talk about his surrender, and he talks about how you become his devotee. And then specifically, there are some words of demigods. The most easiest ways to find, because I do not remember the shloka numbers, the most easiest way to find the verses are go to the back of Bhagavad Gita as it is. If you have an as it is book, go to the catalog, there will be a word called as demigods, and it will tell you in the book where and all Krishna has spoken about demigods. So if you read some of those verses, it's very clear for us where Krishna speaks about it, but I can give you specific references where he says surrendering unto the demigods is not that intelligent thing to do, where he clearly mentions it.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
It's Shagu. You know, I really liked how you said in today's world, we all want everybody to surrender to us, and we don't want to surrender to anybody.
Right.
In relation to that, if my question is more about applying this surrender logic to real life, because I find that ego is why conflict happens, right? So if somebody always says it's okay, you win, it's okay, like if they keep giving up, doesn't that mean that the world will start taking advantage of them? Like, shouldn't there be a point where you stop and say, no, I'm not going to take this anymore?
Right.
You know what I mean? You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
I understand. So, as I said, surrender unto other human beings, right, is not always on a perfect platform, because people constantly take surrender as exploitation, because they slowly move into the world of exploitation. And I can give you an example from history, which I wanted to speak about, but in the interest of time, I did not. There was this great king, which we learn in history of India, called Prithviraj Chauhan. I don't know. And there was this king called Prithviraj Chauhan, and his enemy at the gates was Muhammad Ghori. There was a king of north who constantly attacked his kingdom. And every time Prithviraj Chauhan won over Muhammad Ghori. In fact, when he was won, they used to catch Muhammad Ghori and bring before Prithviraj Chauhan. And Muhammad Ghori was in a very despicable state. And Prithviraj Chauhan would say, look, you have come here, you have got defeated, you take shelter unto me. It is our Vedic tradition that we will leave you. And he used to leave Muhammad Ghori. And when he left Muhammad Ghori, it is said that the history now, next time he gathered even a massive army and he came and attacked Prithviraj Chauhan. And this time he fought like a valor, but Prithviraj Chauhan got captured. This time the failure was on the side of Prithviraj Chauhan. So they caught Prithviraj Chauhan and brought him before Muhammad Ghori. And Prithviraj Chauhan said, look at this fate. When you came to me and you asked for my shelter, I left you. So I asked the same. So Muhammad Ghori said, no chance. I am not a fool like you, that I am not going to leave you. And he gouged out his eyes. So much so that he did not repay the shelter, the basic shelter value system that the Vedic system had. And he was thrown into the gallows and the prison of Muhammad Ghori. So much so that in the prison, one time there was a competition where people had to shoot arrows at the target, and everybody was missing the target. And Prithviraj Chauhan, though he did not have his eyes, he was told, will you shoot? He said, yes, I can shoot. And he took the arrow, and without even blinking, before people blinked the eye, he heard the breath of Muhammad Ghori sitting in the gallery and listening, and he shot the arrow and killed him. Just to say that in the Vedic tradition, if you do not know how to give shelter, if you exploit somebody else, that person is not worthy to be shelter. Why I gave this example is just to give an anecdotal to you, that is, shelter unto other human beings are not always successful because they have the 4 defects. However, the fact is that whenever we see some exploitation is happening, because we are saying that you are right, I am wrong, you are right, I am wrong, and the person is exploiting us, then we should have some self-respect also. Surrender is with intelligence. We don't surrender our intelligence. Our intelligence has to be applied for surrender. Not that we blind faithfully, we surrender our intelligence also saying you are always right, I am always wrong. No. And the yardstick to measure whether it's going right or wrong is by the fruit, which is love prospering between both the relationships? If there is no love which is prospering between both the relationships, then it is purely an exploitation or a business like relationship. In a shelter and in a surrender, the love prospers between the surrendered and the surrender giver, that is a shelter giver. In this case, the Lord and the soul who is doing. So that's the yardstick which we measure. If it is going wrong, we need to cross check ourselves. Am I in the right path, or we should take help?
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Any other question? I know we are quite much on time. We are at around an hour and a half. But if there are more questions, please shoot it to Nadia Chandra Prabhu and he can forward it to me, and I can give offline voice recordings, and I can answer those questions. But again, once again, thank you very, very much for giving me this opportunity. We will meet again next week to see through the either the penultimate or the ultimate conclusion of how to do the surrender and practically take these examples as well. Now that we have established Krishna is the source to whom we have to surrender. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you, Haridas Varya Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add a little comment with regards to demigod worship. It's a very in-depth topic. It is more of changing the ways that we have been brought up. So, for example, sometimes we would know that certain things are right and certain things are not the best practice. But it's because we have been brought up in such a way. It's more of a cultural change than a change of understanding or change of knowledge. So I think even though we have been, many of us here present, we would have been brought up in a certain way, in a certain cultural pattern, worshipping certain gods as a Kula Deva, we would call family deity. My thought would be continue to explore the Vedic tradition, continue to explore Bhagavad Gita, and the more we go deeper and deeper, that's when the change will happen automatically from a heart. The heart changes slowly. It will not happen over the years. I've seen a lot of people, even my parents. I was brought up in Krishna consciousness, so I didn't feel a difference. But my parents, over so many years, they were worshipping. My dad was like strong Shankara philosopher. They worship so many demigods. But over the years, even after hearing Bhagavad Gita, it took them a while to grasp it, to absorb it, then think over it. And then the change was very gradual. That way, what happens is the change is sustainable.
Right.
We completely we completely convince ourselves with experiences. That's how the change of heart happens. Theoretical knowledge is great, but what happens is when we actually start to experience, Krishna says the same deity that we are worshipping will actually give us the way forward to move.
Right.
The same deity will actually open up, like just like you showed the example of Chandidas. The same thing will happen to us, and until that, we need to just have patience. We just need to have patience from our own culture. We continue to worship the demigods. We continue to pray to them, and even though at some stage we might have Krishna as a central deity in a house, our respect for the demigod will never come down. And our respect for any other person worshipping the demigod also doesn't come down. One of the biggest mistakes I see with a lot of people who quickly take up, change their worship from one god to the other god, is that people start to actually condescend. Or when I say condescend, is you start to look down upon the other. That is completely, it is not a Vaishnava quality. It is completely not a.
And Krishna doesn't like that as well, right? And Krishna doesn't like that as well.
For example, if one has been worshipping Lord Shiva, or if you're worshipping Krishna, and then if you actually go against and say no, Lord Shiva is not the supreme, you can't worship him, Lord Shiva is bad, that Krishna's not gonna like him, because of all the greatest Vaishnavas, Krishna says it is Lord Shiva, and then you can't just go and blaspheme. So the change will, sometimes it might happen faster, sometimes it will be very slow, but that change of heart, that is what is going to convince us, help us, and even that respect to that demigod. Even when so what happens is that you still continue to pray to the same person, you might still continue to pray to Shiva, but the prayer is different. That is the only change that is going to happen. The consciousness with which you're going to approach Lord Shiva or Lord Durga or Ganesha is going to be different, but you still approach them. It is not that you throw them away, the deity is gone, and every time you see the deity, you will no, I'm Krishna's Vaishnava. No, that is not the mood of worship. When the change of heart happens, this is what is going to happen. You will still continue to worship, but the consciousness of worship is totally different, and that's what is going to make the big change. Until that, we just have patience. We just pray to Krishna. We just pray to both gods. Please show me the right path. I've been hearing in these lectures, these ISKCON people are telling me Krishna is a supreme. So my request is, I've seen so many people in this exactly the same situation. My request is, please pray, continue to pray to the same God that, oh my Lord, I've been worshiping you for so many years. Now I'm confused. My heart is paining to hear this. Please show me the right path. We ask so many things to the gods and goddesses. Why don't we ask this to give us the knowledge to actually worship as well? And that way, what happens is that change of heart will happen. And until that change of heart will happen, we need to have patience. When I say we need to have patience, it means you continue to listen to the message of Bhagavad Gita, and you continue to worship, and then slowly that change will happen. We just wait it out. We just wait it out. That's the whole. It is not going to happen over one class, two class, maybe months, maybe years. But as a person who is a speaker, I need to have patience, and as a person who is a seeker, you need to have patience. I think that's the key message when we'll have this change of heart. But that change of heart should happen, must happen. It's a time when it is going to happen is where we need to actually see how it happens. But it is a very in-depth topic. It is a very in-depth topic. It's a very sensitive topic. It is a very nourishing topic. The more you get convinced, what happens is that after a few years, no matter who comes and tells, you will have the respect to respond to that person. Plus your faith on the Lord just increases multifold. It is just unexplainable how much surrender you will get to Krishna. It is just unexplainable. You just have to experience it. Like Prabhu was saying, different gradations of love. That is where we are looking. Different gradations of surrender is actually different gradations of love, where you, at some stage, we feel like giving everything we have for the Lord. Like I was telling another family there, the Lord doesn't actually see what we are giving him. The Lord always sees what we are holding back. The Lord always sees what we are holding back. And in that ultimate love and ultimate surrender, we just give up everything, just like we give up to our little kids and just like we give to our partner. We just don't hold back. The more we hold back is where shows a degree of surrender. And very nice lecture, Prabhu. Very beautiful examples from Ramayana, where Ram promises about Vibhishan and how Ramchandra says that once someone says with the heart, when the heart melts and says, "I am yours, oh my Lord," the Lord.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, and absolutely true. Never we say that disrespect to any of the demigods. We see them all connected to Krishna. Thank you very much.
That's the key message. Like all surrender to Krishna, but we always have so much of respect. We have so much because you actually understand what the position is and how much higher platform they are than us, and how much nicely and how nicely they worship the Lord than us. We always have respect. That's why they're demigods, and that's why we're suffering here in the material world.
I
have chosen them.
I just remember one thing by which I want to conclude. I remember Srila Prabhupada telling this to one of the people. The person who shows you the gold mine is more worthy than the gold mine itself. So, yeah, the person who shows us where the treasure is more worthy than the treasure in itself. Because if that person is not there, then we cannot achieve the treasure. So the demigods are the marksmen, or they are the ones who are marked out where the treasure is, and hence we are always indebted to them. So that's a great person.
Yeah.
Thank you once again. I don't want to hold you back for a long time, but let's meet all next week as well, and let's churn these discussions even further. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.